afternoon, my friends. This is the Grimflayer. I hope you're doing very well today, and welcome to another Modern Donation League. This one is with Boros Blitz, or Boros Prowess, featuring Clever Lumimancer, first time ever. And definitely very excited. One of my favorite archetypes is Prowess. I have high hopes for the White Splash. We're going to see today how it does. I'm going to give you a really thorough deck tech, including the way I'm not building the deck. We'll talk about my first draft, which is very different from the second draft, and why I ended up shifting gears, and we'll go through the full 75 before I show you a little bit of gameplay here. But first, a couple quick housekeeping notes. Number one, this is a replay. I have tagged that in the title, or I plan to. Haven't actually written the title up yet at the time of this recording. And I'm going to tag that from now on, just so you know what you're clicking before you click it. The vast majority of my content will be live recorded, especially because with the new machine, I think my technical issues that occasionally force me into replays are going to be mostly, I hope, a thing of the past. However, I do still offer replays, and the donor in this case requested one. In his words, he likes the replays because I can go quickly through the spots where not that much is happening, and then I can really slow down and analyze the spots that are complicated, especially with the benefit of hindsight, right? So there is still a time and a place and a preference for replays. We're going to do one here. I think Prowess is relatively suited to the replays, right? Because some of the time it's going to be super quick, and other times there's going to be a lot to talk about. So I'm going to do my best to min-max in the best possible way, that type of thing. The other quick housekeeping note is that step by step, we're going to try to make the content better with the new setup. I am now trying to crop the screen as I record it. Hopefully that goes off without a hitch and without a reduction in quality. As always, if there are any tips you have or any feedback you have on the visual or the audio nature of what you're seeing, please do leave them in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you as well to Jay, our donor, who has requested this Boros Prowess replay league. We have Jay, is somebody who, much like me, started off in serious Modern, basically, with BG The Rock, and then having watched my channel for The Rock content, Jay actually took my advice, I know a few others at least have, and followed me to Mono Red Prowess as a secondary deck. I've advised that for a long time. Mono Red Prowess is affordable, it's very powerful, and it's a complete change of pace from BG The Rock, while still being a fair interactive deck. A great secondary deck, a great alternative. Breath of fresh air when we play Prowess after playing The Rock forever, right? So Jay has stuck by Mono Red through the emergence of Rakdos and Izzet Prowess. But the White Splash has got him a little bit interested, so Jay asked me, please play a Boros Prowess League. He prefers the replay form, and he said, you make the list, whatever you want is fine with me. So, let's talk about that. I actually began with the idea of playing Lurrus of the Dream Den because, of course, Clever Lumimancer is the big attraction to playing white. She is a 1-drop, and that means we have 12 1-drops here that are Prowess or pseudo-Prowess in her case, and that is completely amazing. That is a game changer. That is the main reason to play white in the first place. We've got other incentives too. But Lurrus, of course, also a white card, and look at that. This is our free roll second wave of attack if you're not playing Bedlam Reveler, which at first I was not. And buying back all of these 1-drops seems like an absolute dream. And I do still think that's good, and I do still think that's a real way to build the deck. Here's the problem, guys. Right now, the meta is completely hostile to mono, or to any form of Prowess, really. Especially the mono red or the traditional style versions, like playing just a lot of little creatures without stuff like Bedlam Reveler or maybe Stormwing Entity to go above the removal, to outgrind it, to get ETB value, and to dodge a lot of commonly played removal. Now, Lurrus can help you win through removal because he's a free 8th card that buys back your threats. But I'm telling you, the format is so hostile from what I've seen, from what I've played, and from what other people have said, that I don't think Lurrus is enough right now for grinding power with a deck like this. Everybody saw this deck coming. It's continuing to put up some results and challenges and stuff, so people are still packing a ton of hate for it. Now, there's also a couple other issues here. We have Mishra's Bauble, of course, very, very good with Lurrus. Definitely reasonable in Prowess in general, but notably does not trigger Clever Lumimancer. So there's a bit of a do we, don't we with that type of card. And then Light Up the Stage, if we do feel the need to grind, we're going to want to play all 4 of these to grind through opposing interaction. That card, as well as sorceries in general, and Forked Bolt is another one that I personally prefer as a pet card. The sorceries get a lot worse with Mishra's Bauble, because you top deck a Bauble, if you immediately crack it, you find an instant, okay, that might be great. Use it on the opponent's turn, no tempo lost, maybe you have a crucial removal before they connect with a creature or something, but if you find a sorcery off Bauble, you are out of luck. So that definitely was enough for me, those different incentives, and I did dabble a little bit with the Lurrus build just in the tournament practice lobby, and I said, you know what, this is way too hostile for me. So my mind next went to Bedlam Reveler, and this is the second version, this is V2.0, and this is what I played for the league, and this is what I stand by right now. Bedlam Reveler allows you to go way over the top of removal. Bedlam Reveler says, okay, you're going to play a 1-for-1 game, here is my 4-for-1. You know, here's my 3-4 Prowess threat that only costs 2 and draws 3 upon ETB. So we've got 3 in the main and the 4th one in the side, basically because I couldn't decide whether to play 3 main deck or 4. If you play 4, you're going to have more mulligans, you're going to have more early clunk. I opted to split the difference there. That way, we also don't have to worry about playing Mishra's Bauble, because Bauble, while you can play it in a mono-red build with Reveler, win a white build, there's just not enough slots for it anyway, and we get to still grind as best as we can with the full 4 Light Up the Stage, and we've got, again, the super fast turn 3 potential with 9 through 12 1-drops, and that is basically the 2 ends of the deck, the go over the top end and the go quick end. That's what bookends this list. Now we have some non-negotiables. We have to obviously play lands. I have decided to stick with the relative minimum of 18 lands. No surprises here. 4 fetch lands, 3 foundries. It could be 5 and 2, whatever. We do need a lot of white sources, though, because we've got some double white in the sideboard, and in general, we need to have at least 1 white every game. So 3 foundry, only 3 basic mountain. We do have to say that Lava Dart gets a little bit worse in this deck, just because there are not as many mountains to flash back with, but still an all-star, 4 Inspiring Vantage and 4 Sunbaked Canyon. No surprises there. I also think Crash Through is completely non-negotiable. These cantrips, these low-curve cantrips that offer some form of evasion, very good in Prowess in general, even better with Clever Lumimancer, who gets so big so fast. So Crash Through, Lava Dart, Lightning Bolt, Manamorphose, all non-negotiable for us. Let's talk about what else is in the list, rounding it out. So Boros Charm is a card that is a little bit difficult to parse because, number one, it's very high card quality. In terms of an individually powerful burn spell, it's the most powerful card in the deck besides maybe Lightning Bolt, and it also is the most versatile. Dealing 4 while attacking is obviously a great way to race. Indestructible is actually quite relevant, especially against sweeper effects, and Double Strike is especially relevant with Clever Lumimancer, being number 1, just more powerful than dealing 4 a lot of the time if you're swinging uncontested, and number 2, able to make your stuff huge even in the face of a Leyline of Sanctity. Despite that, it can be a little bit clunky. It's weird to call a 2-mana instant clunky, but it's kind of true, right? And also, sometimes we don't need quality as much as we need card synergy, right? So that let me settle on about 2 of them. I could see going up, I could see maybe going down, but I do think we should be playing this card. I do think it is really good in here. I also mentioned Forked Bolt. Now, these could be Burst Lightnings, they could be Lava Spikes, they could be any number of other things. Forked Bolt is a pet card of mine. I've made the arguments for it ad infinitum in the past. We've got 2 copies here. We're really able to play a really good board control game with the way I have this set up against opposing small creature decks. Now, the gut shots and the mutagenic growth. So we have 2 of the latter, 1 of the former. These cards, I have always, from day 1 with Lumimancer, felt the incentive to play them with her. they are going to be very important just for making her go even faster. But also, Lumimancer, one downside of her, a couple downsides of her, she dies to ping effects where the 1/2s do not, and she also does not just attack on her own and turn on light up the stage. So if you're keeping a one-lander with like a Lumimancer or two and a light up or two, you need some burn spell or some way to pump her or some free spell to cast in order to have her be a light up enabler in order to, number one, clock more quickly, and number two, really just unleash your entire hand. That's where these cards come in. Gut Shot, Mutagenic Growth, and to me, they knit the whole deck together because Bedlam Reveler actually loves these free spells too. You just jam them. You just rip off all these free spells, you cast your Bedlam Reveler even earlier than you otherwise would. Gut Shot is higher floor and more proactive. That's why I'm opting for 2 over the 1 Mutagenic Growth. But Growth is really powerful too. It's a good reactive card against damage-based removal, and it does probably have a higher ceiling just because it does a little bit more damage with an uncontested creature, right? Also, they can both be really good combat tricks, especially Mutagenic Growth, so that is the 60 I've come up with. And in the sideboard, we've got a lot to like, I think. We're very well prepared for the mirrors, with 4 copies of Kor Firewalker really rewarding us, I hope, for playing white. And it's also good against, like, 2-color red decks, like if we're against a Rakdos mid-range or especially Ponza, Kor Firewalker can definitely be a nice one to reach for. 3 copies of Path to Exile for when you need really hard removal. 3 copies of Rip Apart New Strixhaven technology. This is our Abrade of the Boros deck, right? You're able to tag an artifact or deal 3 damage to a creature, and although it's at sorcery instead of instant, that is still exactly what Abrade does in every other way, and Abrade is an absolute all-star. You've got to have answers to Chalice, and it is really nice to be able to just use them as removal spells. Bring them in against small creature decks, or against like Ether Vial decks, it's a flexible modal spell. Sometimes you'll hit their Vial, sometimes you'll hit a creature, either way it's going to be awesome. But Rip Apart does even more. You can hit a Planeswalker for 3 with this, which is a really nice alternative use case, and you can destroy enchantments with this, which mono-red Prowess, or black-red, or blue-red, frankly, can't really do anyway. So Rip Apart definitely nice in enabling us to destroy ley lines and all of the rest. 2 copies of Kozilek's Return. This is going to give us even more board control against go-wide strategies. It is good against Heliod, especially because Auric Champion is now main decked, and it's very good against that card specifically. 2 copies of Cleansing Wildfire will let us race while disrupting against big mana decks or decks that have very few basic lands to search for. And finally, as mentioned before, we got that 4th copy of Big Bad Bedlam Reveler in the sideboard for when we need to grind. So thank you once again to Jay for your generous support for allowing me to play this really cool deck on your behalf. Thank you to everyone else out there watching, and yeah, let's look at our replay games. Let's see how well we did blitzing them out. All right. On the play, we are keeping a one-lander. It's got everything to like. It's super aggro, low curve. But we do risk stumbling if we don't hit that second land. But between Crash Through and Light Up, both enabled by Swifty, we can control the board against small creatures very well. We should statistically be in with a pretty good shot of getting there. Opponent's going to go Scalding Tarn Pass, and then we draw Mutagenic Growth. Okay, it's a free spell, you know, so if our land woes continue, we'll at least still be able to multi-spell. But we're going to just attack and then try to light up into a second land. I think that's the safest course of action here. We get the most looks at cards as opposed to Crash Through. Crash Through might have a higher ceiling if we could guarantee a land off the top, right? But we can't, so let's light up. We got 2 looks at a land now, right? We've got our draw step, and we've had 2 looks, and we whiff. So already it's like, oh man, what do we do? So if we want to play a value-positive game, we absolutely have to draw a second land off the top next turn, and even so, we'll have really been slowed down, right? But at least if we do that, we'll have Soul-Scar into Lightning Bolt next turn, and then we'll try to recover our tempo a bit from there with our really fast hand. But opponent on the end step will cycle Forgotten Cave off of Basic Mountain, and that pretty much confirms that it is Dredge. they'll go Gemstone Mine into Thrilling Discovery. So it gets worse and worse because our Dredge opponent, I think, kept 7. I think they kept 7. Either way, maybe mull to 6 at the most. Thrilling Discovery. Now, we got to talk about this one. This is the new look Dredge tech, and this is very bad for us on Prowess because it makes the deck that much more consistent. It's extra copies of Cathartic Reunion, essentially, and it gains life. It's just incidental life gain, and against Dredge, it is often a pure race. That 2 life matters enormously. On top of that, it puts them into white, so whether they're going to play maybe Smiting Helix, Silver Smoke Ghoul, that whole package, or whether they've got white cards like Leyline of Sanctity, Deafening Silence, it's all very bad news for us. So I think Dredge has gotten to be a pretty bad matchup for Prowess as things stand, especially if, like me, you decided not to put any graveyard hate in your sideboard. So GG, right? But feeling pretty bad here. Opponent's got a really functional curve out. We've missed our land with our first 3 draws, and now here they go. We see Conflagrate, double Ox of Agonis, Stinkweed Imp. We see a Narcomoeba come out, returning a Prized Amalgam. It's all pretty rough stuff for us. So let's just draw a land now and we can at least have some hope. Instead, we draw another light up the stage. So what do? Do we just take our medicine, play Soul-Scar Mage, lose the Lightning Bolt, say go? And I thought about that, but I said, you know what? I think we've stumbled too much. We have to crash through this turn. This is the high upside play we have to take. If we get there with the second land, then we'll be rewarded, right? Then we get to play Soul-Scar, try to go big next turn, and indeed we do. The other good thing about crashing through there is it does enable us to attack for 2. Again, that feels pretty bad because they just gained it incidentally with Thrilling Discovery, but this is what we've got to do. So sadly, the Lightning Bolt will fade into Exile. It's back over to the OP. Let's see how else they can go off. Another thing to mention here is I decided to save my Mutagenic Growth for a time when we had 2 creatures or more on the field, just to pump them both up more, but it also helps against Conflagrate. If they decide to try to Conflagrate our board away or something, Mutagenic Growth could definitely mess that up. So OP gonna swing in. We're, once again, not going to use the Growth there to block Amalgam or anything. We'll just take the hit, and then we'll see what the opponent does. Do they go for Conflagrate? No. They'll go for Ox of Agonis. And here comes another big Dredge turn, right? And they do get Creeping Chill. And then I see another couple Creeping Chills in the yard. I suppose these were in hand that they discarded to the Ox, but don't quote me on that. It does happen a little bit too quickly sometimes on replay to see. But in any case, we get chilled once. Hey, the opponent's back up to 20. Don't you hate to see it? And we're at 10. And they have Conflagrate in the yard to finish us off. They also have another Ox to escape. They're just going completely ham with the dredging. And we're down to 10, and they have a big board. So we have to try to kill them this turn. That is my view. We draw land off the top. Honestly, that's a good draw. We got to empty our whole hand if we're going to have a chance to win. And this is the way to do it. We'll kick it off. We'll fetch first, actually, to thin. And then we'll kick it off with a Manamorphose, of course. We're just making double red. Even if we find a Boros Charm or something, we can still cast it off Foundry, but mostly we're looking to cast red spells, right? And that Ox is a blocker in our path, so we're going to go ahead and point a Forked Bolt at it, which doesn't feel the very greatest, but that's what we've got. And then we're going to finish it off with a Lava Dart. And now we get to actually flash back the Lava Dart main phase, allowing us to light up the stage main phase, and this is just putting the most damage possible across. It still might not quite be enough unless we draw a free spell off of the light up, which we do. Gut Shot plus Mutagenic Growth. Look at that, guys. Gut Shot you, put you to 18. Growth my Soul-Scar Mage. We're swinging with an 8-9 and a 10-11. Getting the turn 4 kill for Xaxes through 5 points of life gain and through us missing a land drop on the second turn. Absolutely insane. This is a criminal act that has been perpetrated against Dredge. This is grand larceny. This is a serious theft of game 1. And it was about as close as you can get. Again, we just do Xaxes, and we needed the help of these free spells to accomplish that. So already feeling pretty rewarded for including those in the deck. Now, normally with Dredge, maybe you lose game 1 and you get better post-side. As I mentioned, we don't really have any graveyard hate in the entire deck, so we'll see how it goes those post-side, but even that game 1 win at least felt pretty good. Alright, so sideboarding can be approached a few different ways. In this case, on the draw, I chose to play 2 copies of Path to Exile. We trim a Bedlam Reveler just a little bit too slow, perhaps, and also trim a Light Up the Stage for the same reason. Rip Apart is interesting, but better on the play, because it can hit Shriekhorn, but that's not a good enough use case, like hitting a Shriekhorn or killing a recursive creature. Not good enough use cases for a card that can't go to face. I will play this card on the play, though, against Dredge, I think, in like 1 or 2 copies, if I see Leyline of Sanctity plus Shriekhorn and or Deafening Silence, stuff like that, then we're probably getting to the point where we have enough use cases. On the draw, though, again, we're just speeding up a little bit. Hard removal for 1 mana at instant speed over a Reveler and a Light Up the Stage. So on the draw, we've got a 1-lander. It basically just does everything our decks has signed up to do. Again, we don't have Grave Hate to mulligan toward, so despite the risk of a 1-lander, we're going to keep it. Opponent, unfortunately, keeping 7, opening on Shriekhorn. They're going to pass, holding up the activation. So first order of business is probably to find a second land, and admittedly we do, and it's a painless one. A nice find. Inspiring Vantage will take it. OP Shriekhorns into Oxyvagonus Gemstone Mine. Nothing immediately concerning, but then the second hit on their upkeep yields Golgari Thug and Prized Amalgam. Now it's starting to get real scary, because now the Thug can dredge, and dredging, number 1, lets them go off, number 2, makes that Ox they hit with the first one a lot scarier, and they put another Ox, another Thug into the yard, and have another Shriekhorn to cast, so lots of redundancy from the opponent. It gets worse. They find Stinkweed Imp, they play the second land tapped, and then it's back over to us, so definitely OP going off, doing their thing, and we draw a third land, which is probably pretty good with how our hand is shaping up, so we're going to go ahead and Lava Dart and to Light Up the Stage for a way to maximize damage output this turn and give us the most cards to see before turn 3. We're once again in a position where we kind of have to try to kill them T3. Sadly, we don't have a second threat right now, nor is it coming off of the finds here. So let's see what opponent does. Can they go off? They sure can. Stinkweed Imp off the first hit. Second hit yielding another one. They've got Narcomoeba. They've got Amalgams coming back. It's all getting a little bit crazy, my friends. So again, we've got a pretty good hand, but we're on the draw, and the Dredge player's hand's probably a little bit better. In the main phase, here comes an Ox, and they're gonna ditch Conflagrate, a couple other Dredge effects, going completely nuts, finally starting to find some Creeping Chills as well, 2 of those. Absolute dredging in progress, make no mistake. These Narcomoebas, though, they're not the worst. One reason we save Crash Through is to get through small blockers like that, but we're definitely going to have our work cut out for us here. We have a life total that has been swung drastically in their favor, 22 to 12. They've got this gigantic board. They've got all the value in the world. We do see Leyline of Sanctity is in there as well. So, good to know about. We do draw a second threat, which is what we wanted. Sadly, it's not Swifty. It's not a haste one. But we still might have to play him. But we'll Manamorphose first, see if we can find Swifty or whatever. We find Bedlam Reveler. A card, admittedly, but one that is a little bit too slow. I floated white there because we know that pathing the Ox is probably something we're going to have to do. We just do it main phase to use up our floated mana. And we play a second Soul-Scar Mage, and now the order of business is to try to stay alive, right? So I go for an attack, no reason to waste those prowess triggers, I suppose. We could also be really defensive and sit back with both. But basically, I'm hoping the opponent doesn't have the juice to kill us here, but it turns out that they actually just kind of do. They have Conflagrate in the bin. Not really respecting that. I'm just saying, you know what, we're so far behind. Let's hope that we spook them into not all-out attacking, right? Let's hope we spook them into more defensive posture. Sadly, OP calls our bluff, so it's basically over. We can take a super defensive posture here if we want. I think that's playing not to lose, so we just Lava Dart something. The super defensive thing to do would be to bolt an Amalgam that was attacking, and honestly, that might have been optimal anyway, just to save that 3 points of damage, but we know they've got the Conflagrate coming anyway, and it does basically finish us off. If we'd bolted an Amalgam, they'd be at 18. We'd be at 1, maybe, but we can't tap Sunbaked Canyon anyway. We have simply a Crash Through and a Reveler in hand. It's just not going to be enough, right? Even our free spells that might allow us to do 18 damage, they won't be castable either when we're at 1 life. So that's about that. Basically, again, at that point, we've been beaten. We kind of hope that they don't have the courage to turn every single creature sideways, and or they don't see lethal. Opponent does see both, and that's that. On to game 3. All right, G3 on the play. We cut the paths, we bring back a Light Up the Stage, could be a Reveler too, not sure which one is better, and a Rip Apart, just because we know Leyline is in there, and it's again better to hit Shriekhorn more realistically on the play. We're just getting more proactive, basically. And look at this hand, 2 lands, 5 spells, they're all 1-drops, and it's triple Swifty plus Lava Dart Crash Through. This is a heck of a hand. All it does is race, but that's all our deck can do against Dredge with my configuration. So, on the play, opponent will mull to 6. That's a good sign, too. I think they kept 7-7-6, though. That's a lot of, that's a high overall hand count for Dredge. Make no mistake, they do mull deep a lot more than that. But let's see what we can do here with our Swift hand, our Swiftspear-laden hand. OP gonna shock Shriekhorn and pass. So back to us, we draw Soul-Scar Mage. Well, now I'm starting to wonder, are we a little bit too creature-heavy for our own good? Do we just need to draw more non-creature spells? That remains to be seen. So what we're going to do is play Swifties out here, or play 1 Swifty out rather, and basically look for the highest possible damage on turn 3, which means playing Soul-Scar now, playing Swifty next turn, and hoping that between our draw step and the Crash Through, we find a 3rd land so we can play every spell in our hand. It is slightly higher floor, maybe, to have played the Swifty now. If we get stuck on lands, that could punish us. In any case, it's fine margins, and I'm going for the highest upside, because with no disruption that is meaningful anywhere in sight, we're just going for the T3 kill. Opponent's first hit off Shriekhorn is a brick. It's another Shriekhorn and a land, and the second one is an even bigger brick. They put 2 lightning axes in the bin. Let's go. That is super, super exciting. Also very lucky, not gonna lie. But OP isn't solely dependent on the Shriekhorn, it seems. They will fetch and then play good old Cathartic Reunion. So opponent with a hand that's very powerful at 6, a lot of redundancy, but they only have life from the loam to pitch. So I'm thinking, okay, they only dredge 3. We could definitely fade a really bad one here. They also pitch a land in they pitch, Ox of Agonis as well. And then it is Dredge 3 time, and look at this. They hit Golgari Thug and Narcomoeba, and then off of Thug they hit Prized Amalgam and Creeping Chill. That is actually pretty rough stuff, right? Definitely a little bit scary. I was hoping we'd fade that type of thing altogether, but as it turns out, opponent with a pretty good turn, and more still to come with a Shriekhorn activation in the bank, life from the loam in hand at a minimum. So what can we do here for our turn? There it is. There's the land we've been waiting for. Wooded Foothills, fetching Mountain, playing the Swifty, playing out a Crash Through, and then we find another Lava Dart. My first thought is, well, that's another good card to have in the back pocket, that's for sure. And then my second thought was, we don't need it, because for the second time this match, we get them for Exaxes on turn 3. And hey, you know what? Clever Lumimancer not even needed. We've just got the old school squad. And it occurs to me that I forgot to buy the old bordered Swifties, or to rent them, so sorry about that. But look, you gotta match the Soul-Scar Mage. He doesn't have an old border yet. Look at this synergy. Look at this squad. Look at these T3 kills. Through, again, some incidental life gain against Dredge. Definitely love to see it. So we escape with a victory against Dredge despite having 0 graveyard hate cards in the entire 75. And despite Dredge, I would say, being a very bad matchup for us now. Definitely an example of the hostile meta that I mentioned, but we do come out victorious here. Barely. Barely, but the deck looking very powerful, you have to say. Onward to round 2. Round 2 on the draw against a mulling opponent, and we have the classic play 3 Revelers in your deck, fine-tune your opening hand conundrum, but if you think about just one of these being a dead card, except maybe against, like, non-targeted discard effects, or permission, redundancy, whatever, this is actually a keep, because if you bottom one of these Bedlam Revelers or pretend it doesn't exist, you would definitely keep the remaining 6 in a blind. So, pretty easy keep, and we'll see what we're up against, right? OP gonna keep 6, and they are going to play Urza's Mine and say go. So are we against Green Tron, Blue Tron, or Alien Tron? We'll find out. In any case, no matter which of these we are against, it's got to be Soul-Scar Mage turn 1. OP's got an Urza's Tower T2 into, you guessed it, Chalice of the Void on 1. So I think any other Tron deck, we're quite favored. Against Eldrazi Tron, we are quite unfavored. Even worse of a matchup than Dredge, I dare say. So we have drawn a light up the stage. Admittedly, that is a good draw. It's going to give us something to do that doesn't get chaliced, and Manamorphose does not enable us to main phase Manamorphose and then also cast light up for Spectacle, because the mana will expire, right? So we gotta just attack for 1 and then light up, and we find another Manamorphose, so that's actually pretty good. And then Crash Through is something I throw into the bin post-combat. Why? Well, if we are going to get anywhere in this game, it's going to be with Bedlam Reveler going over the top of Chalice of the Void, and we could also have maybe waited on that, and I did tank over this decision a little bit. Wait on that, Lightning Bolt maybe at instant speed could be interesting, just to surprise the opponent if nothing else, with a pump in response to maybe like a Walking Ballista or something. If they had one more land, maybe I would do that. Then again, they could have Tron, and that could become relevant. Also, in general, that incentive exists outside of this turn, though. So I think holding Lightning Bolt in hand for future combat tricks, even though we're just casting it into Chalice, makes more sense to me. In any case, that probably won't be a decision that influences the match, but I'm just basically going to try to chain Manamorphoses together next turn, get a decent-sized attack in this turn, and set up for a turn, I guess maybe turn 3 Rev if we get lucky, probably more like turn 4, right? In any case, opponent with a Thought-Knots here on turn 3 off of Eldrazi Temple. You do hate to see it. They take the Manamorphose, makes sense to me. That does punish us just a tad for just throwing a Crash Through away, but it's not like we have outs to Chalice G1 anyway. We draw another Crash Through. You don't love to see that. We're going to make double red here, and we are just planning to throw everything into the Chalice. We're all in on that Bedlam Reveler plan, so that's what we're going to do. It feels pretty bad, and we've drawn Mutagenic Growth, so this attack alone is enough to, give the opponent a bad block. And then, yeah, we'll pay 2 life and lose a card to deal 1 extra damage to the opponent. Seems great, seems like a winning line, but we do have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spells in the bin. Mission accomplished in terms of getting Reveler online. Let's see what the opponent's got. Well, it's going to be a Mind Stone into a Warping Whale. So this is an example of where it would have been nice, again, to hold up one of these instant speed effects to beat the Warping Whale, but it's not a card you should really play around, in my opinion, especially if you don't know they have it. I think we were correct to fill up the graveyard aggressively, get as much damage across as we could there, but opponents really got just about everything they could need against us. Bedlam Reveler will hit the field now. Lightning Bolt is a dead draw. We're happy to just not use it. And then we find another Reveler. So, okay, if the opponent maybe stalls out a little bit here, especially if they, we are representing an instant speed something to make this attack very, very risky. So I'm starting to think, okay, this is how we beat Chalice. We can go over the top of it with Bedlam Reveler. We can throw a bunch of spells into Chalice, maybe draw a Boros Charm or 2. This is a way we can beat it. Opponents only got 1 card in hand. They've already had everything they could possibly ask for. What else could they possibly have? Well, let's find out. Looks like Mind Stone is tapping for a Dismember on their end step. Okay, that's a disaster, but hey, we've at least still got a Bedlam Reveler for next turn, but there's not going to be a next turn, because guess what opponent rips off the top? Guess what they have exactly enough mana to cast thanks to Eldrazi Temple? It's Reality Smasher for exactly 9. That feels bad. Hey, now I know how the Dredge player felt in round 1, right? But yeah, absolutely an object lesson in exactly why Eldrazi Tron is a nightmarish matchup for most Prowess variants. I think this one, no exception. But look, Bedlam Reveler gave us our only possible chance. You know, if we're trying to, like, put Lurrus into hand against this progression, we have no chance whatsoever. If the opponent didn't have such a nut draw, Bedlam Reveler actually could have gotten us over the top of that prison piece. But as it was, we got real bad in game one. Sideboarding here, an intriguing prospect, my friends. Let me know what you think, of course. The biggest question mark is over Path to Exile. Path is a pretty good card against Eldrazi Tron, right? But at the same time, if they play a relatively high wastes count, like even if they're up to 3 wastes, and or if they don't draw any naturally, it does work at odds with our Cleansing Wildfire plan. It is also a reactive card. We want to be as aggressive as we can justifiably be on the play, especially. And furthermore, we need to cheat away from the 1-drop slot as much as we can afford to against Chalice of the Void. So despite Path being a good card against the Eldrazi themselves, I only played 1 on the play. And on the draw, after seeing what they're a little bit more of their exact configuration and whatever else, maybe learning how many basic lands they play, I could be advised to maybe reconfigure that on the draw for game 3. But on the play, we've only got 1 path in, and we are also, as mentioned, cheating away from that 1-drop slot. We're cutting the free spells, and we're cutting the Forked Bolt, basically just increasing our card quality while hedging away from the Chalice lockout as much as we can afford to. And we're bringing in some pretty interesting cards. We've got 2 copies of Cleansing Wildfire. We have also 3 copies of Rip Apart. That is definitely an all-star in this matchup. It is also just our out to Chalice as well. So that's sideboarding, and we've got a 4-lander with no threat, so even though the Crash Throughs can dig us toward 1, I do think we have to mulligan that, look for a more explosive 6, and we have a pretty darn good 6. We've got a threat with Clever Lumimancer, Rip Apart to answer, Chalice our map on turn 1, Manamorphose and Crash Through, 2 incredible cards with Lumimancer. So we're going to go ahead and bottom the fetch land, actually. The Sunbaked Canyon is the other one to bottom. I think we're actually supposed to respect our life total enough to not bottom the mountain. I did say that Canyon is more painful over the course of a long game, potentially, than the fetch land, but with all these cantrips plus natural draws, we could flood as well, so we're keeping the Canyon for a bit of flood insurance. And, of course, leading on that new tech, the 0/1 aggro card. Don't you love it? Isn't it just so delightful? Opponent, of course, unfortunately keeping 7 for us. With these decks, we'd love to see them mulligan, right? And they do play turn 1 map. Now, to me, that's a little bit too good to pass up. We're going to lead on Manamorphose, and I'm going to make red-white because I'm probably going to rip that apart. But if we draw Cleansing Wildfire, then maybe we'll use that instead and consider saving the rip apart in case they have the nut draw of 7 with map and Chalice. But at some point, we also have to assume that they don't have the nut draw. Now, here's an example of where the white splash actually hurts us, right? It does give us access to this tech, but the presence of the tech compels us to make white. Now, if we had floated double red, which I don't think was correct with a rip apart in hand, then I would actually risk them just going nuts with map in order to play Swifty and Crash Through, because that would be a really, really good turn right now, and it would set us up for a really good turn next turn. But we can't. We can either play Swifty and let a white go, or we can just rip apart the map. And I'm thinking we just got to rip apart the map. Swifty into Crash Through is still good next turn unless they have exactly Chalice of the Void on 1. And wouldn't you know it, it's a repeat of last game. It's Mine T1 into Tower T2 into Chalice. Exact same as last game, except they had a map for us to kill this time too. And we draw another 1-drop right off the top, and now we're in big, big trouble. So I crack Sunbaked Canyon right away, looking for more things to do, and all we can do is really +2/+2 our Lumimancer, using up a Crash Through, and we've got a bunch of dead cards in hand. Yet again, they've got that turn 3 Eldrazi Temple. Just a repeat of last game, basically. This time it's no Thought Knot, it's a Matter of Shaper. That's actually worse. Our hand is not that good. Wouldn't mind the Thought Knot if we draw an out to it. That could give us a way back in. Instead, Reshaper is just too much to battle through. And insult to injury, we draw Path to Exile, which is not only locked out by Chalice, but even uncastable as a buff, because we cracked our only white land. So a total disaster top to bottom. I do just scoop it up here with the opponent on 4 lands, with them, or with 4 cards in hand about to be 5. I see absolutely no way back in. So there you go. Absolutely brought crashing back down to earth by one of our worst matchups, Eldrazi Tron. Even worse than the new look White Splash Dredge, I do think. And yeah, like I said, a pretty hostile meta to Prowess, but the deck's still looking pretty good. I think in both rounds, like in both games here in round 2, our deck actually looked pretty good. It's just a matter of the opponent having the perfect curve outs basically to deal with our archetype. What are you gonna do? Round number 3, losing the die roll, keeping another 1-land 7, but it's got 6 1-mana spells, including 2 crash throughs we can reasonably expect to curve out here. Opponent gonna go Island Pass, and look at that, never didn't have it. Wooded Foothills, Sacred Foundry, Clever Lumimancer pass to you. Now, against some decks, it's definitely correct to lead on Soul-Scar Mage there over Lumimancer, but against blue, I don't think it matters. But if they're representing maybe the ability to Wrenn and 6 ping you or something on turn 2 on the play, it can be a lot safer to lead on Soul-Scar Mage, right? But in any case, we go for the higher upside of Lumimancer here against an unknown but unlikely to be running us off basic island opponent. So we draw another land. We're just going to fetch to operate off of non-canyon lands, and we're just going to see what the opponent is up to. They're fetching up a couple basics, so it's looking like a blue-black deck, and fairies it is. Thankfully, we have instant speed interaction for that Spell Stutter sprite. It would obviously feel better to point a Lava Dart at the 1/1 instead of a Lightning Bolt, but we'll still do it so we can pump up Lumimancer, and so our Swiftie can resolve. Opponent going to play a Mutavault and say go. We draw Manamorphose, a great one, a great find. We're going to deploy our land first, just maybe a little bit better against certain types of permission, who knows. And we're going to see what we can see. We're going to go double red because we have all red spells in hand, and we'll draw another one. So I'm going to split the difference here. We're going to do at least one crash through, see what we find. And we find another land, okay. So we're going to go ahead and play a Soul-Scar Mage main phase with the floating mana. And now we've got like a big chunky attack, but we have not shoved all in because they haven't done anything in the way of permission. They have 3 untapped lands, and removal or a bounce effect or something is certainly very possible here. So we want to be careful about shoving all in, especially because we have a higher ceiling to shove all in next turn. But opponent does have a removal spell. It's good old Fatal Push. So with us having only 2 cheap spells in hand and 4 lands next turn, we don't need to use every mana source efficiently this turn. On top of that, we're holding up Lava Dart if we need it for anything, but the Lava Dart not going to help us against a main-phased Blood Chief's Thirst, so we're against a Fatal Push, Blood Chief's Thirst deck, you know, very impactful cards against us. It's a good old Dimir tempo deck, Dimir Faeries, right? So we'll kick it off with a crash through. We've drawn another Soul-Scar Mage, which could definitely be good in the face of all this removal. And now let's go Swiftie. It's a safe attack into the Mutavault. Opponent with 3 cards in hand. We'll see if anything happens. I am playing it cagily, right? Again, we're not shoving all in. We're trying to pick our spots to really maximize everything that we're doing. Chip in a little bit here, a little bit there is definitely enough to get us over the line some of the time against a deck like this. We don't need to race as hard as we did in rounds 1 and round 2. Opponent's got a Snapcaster Mage. Yep, it's definitely some real good stuff from them. Snap Push, a nightmare against us. And, you know, even a deck like this where there's a lot of X1s, we can control the board well. They've just got a whole lot of tech for a deck like ours, right? So opponent will make a land drop, and then they're attacking with Snapcaster Mage, and they attacked really quickly. And I started to think here, well, maybe this isn't some ninjutsu nonsense, so even though I hate making this play, we are going to Lava Dart the Snap. And that could have been a disaster against a different type of deck. Like, if I don't think a deck like this is that likely to play Cryptic Command. But if we were worried about both Cryptic and ninjutsu, we would have just Lava Darted the Snap at the earliest possible chance last turn. They could also play Force of Negation, again, not that likely. Lava Dart worse against Force of Negation if we do it on our turn. I guess they just had the mana to hardcast it, though, anyway, so a few things to think about, but ultimately I wasn't really going to deal with a snap, and then I kind of sniffed out Ninjutsu, and sure enough, they're just going to hardcast the Ninjutsu card. Fallen Shinobi, 5/4 Ninjutsu for 5 to hardcast whenever it deals combat damage to a player. That player exiles the top 2 cards of their library until end of turn. You may play those cards without paying their mana costs. Absolutely insane when connecting a real incentive to playing this type of archetype. One things that like fairies with Snapcaster lacks is closing power, but they are evasive. They do have flash and or flying. There's Mutavault as well, and this is the big payoff. It's a quick clock and card advantage all rolled into one. Very, very powerful stuff. We'd love to just be able to remove this card, but we cannot. However, we've drawn Boros Charm and Mutagenic Growth, so the opponent is dead if they don't block, actually. And I actually don't play the land out here. I don't think I did anyway. Don't think we've played a land, because we do not represent the kill as hard this way. But we have it with Boros Charm dealing 4, Mutagenic Growth pumping up our Swifty. If they don't block, they're dead. They do block, that's a good way to get rid of with blah blah blah. Let's try to talk again. That's a good way to get rid of Fallen Shinobi as well. Of course, we'll pump ourselves up. We'll dome them upstairs for 4. We'll win the combat. We stay alive. OP's at 4. We're at 12. They've got 1 card left in hand. They do have a couple Mutavaults, though. That means we can't just freely chip in and put them within range of death. But we have a Lava Dart in the bin as well in the back pocket, and we draw a Forked Bolt, which could definitely be good. So I'm going to go ahead. But annoyingly, Forked Bolt, even though it really wrecks X1s, a lot of the things in this deck, again, they have flash, they are Mutavault, so they're animated at instant speed, so a card like Burst Lightning, despite not being able to be split, is probably way better in this matchup, but we draw Lightning Bolt, so okay, that gives me the courage to just say, we're going to Forked Bolt upstairs. If the burn spells resolve, you're dead. If not, we can attack as a 4/5, force a chump block. You know, we've got all the things in the world to do here, and the opponent just basically seemed F6'd through that first burn spell, so we just main phase the second, and that's the game. So I don't even want to say we stole that game, because we just had a really good curve out. The deck doing things it's kind of meant to do against a deck like this. I guess the draws of Boros Charm and Mutagenic Growth were definitely impactful, though, like giving us the ability to attack into a win-win situation against their hardcast Fallen Shinobi, who could otherwise have turned the game on its head, right? We kill them if they don't block, we kill them in combat while dealing 4 upstairs if they do. So good game 1 win here against Dimir Faeries, or Dimir Tempo. Sideboarding once again tricky here. Partially it's the fact that it's my first time out with white, but also partially I think we have a lot of different ways to configure with, especially the last 2 matchups, this one and Eldrazi Tron, around the edges anyway, but so we have some incentives to play Path to Exile. It's just more removal, but they're not that creature heavy. It's instant speed removal, which is great, but it ramps them, which in that tempo deck with all their mana sinks or the ability to hardcast 5-drops, that is definitely not free either. So I wasn't sure what to do with Path. I ended up leaving it out. We have trimmed a bit around the edges, losing a Light Up the Stage, losing a Mutagenic Growth, which I think is correct against a Fatal Push deck, and also a couple Clever Lumimancers who, again, against Fatal Push, she's not quite as good. These cards are just maybe that little bit higher floor, equally resilient, right? And also, we have things to bring in. We're doing 2 copies of Rip Apart, but not the full 3. Again, sorcery speed removal, not my favorite, but it's more removal. It also can hit Bitter Blossom, which I am suspicious for sure. I thought about bringing in a 4th Bedlam Reveler to grind as well. Didn't end up making that call. Instead, we're playing 2 copies of Kozilek's Return. If they do go wide, especially with Bitter Blossom, it cleans it up really well. And all of our stuff, except the 2 remaining Lumimancers, will survive it. So we kind of have the incentive to side out Lumimancer if we're controlling the board with Kozilek's Return a little bit. I'm sorry, Lumimancer survives that too, so I actually just take that back. In any case, that's how we side, and again, there's incentive for Path to Exile among maybe other things, but that's how I approached this one, having seen what we saw game 1. Opponent will mull to 6, play a tapped Watery Grave. We've got a hand with all the threats, and now we've got a little bit of proactive action with Forked Bolt as well. So definitely a decent keep, but we'll go ahead and play Swifty main phase. OP's got a Mutavault, and I want to kind of test the waters here for permission or maybe for removal or something, because we actually cannot freely attack into the Mutavault unless we just main phase to Fork Bolt, right? So I'm okay playing this, seeing what happens. Opponent hesitated, and I was thinking, okay, is there maybe a Remand or something? So thinking specifically of Remand, I'm like, I'll play Soul-Scar Mage, almost want my opponent to Remand it, and if not, I guess we just don't attack this turn, right? And we're still deploying 3 threats. Unfortunately, I have Spell Stutter Sprite, which is pretty good in that spot, but on the bright side, we do get to turn him sideways. A 1-2 bigger, it turns out, than a 1-1. So, opponent will make a basic land drop, pass it back to us. Spell Stutter on D. We can do a couple different things here, but I do decide to begin by shoving all in. We've got Kozilek's Return. The dream here is that they try to fire up Mutavault. We get to 2-for-1 them that way, but opponent does nothing, so I ultimately decide to do nothing too, and we're just passing, holding up Kozilek's Return, right? Because I'm thinking, okay, they maybe have something to flash in, like Brazen Borrower, Vendilion Clique, these are cards on my radar, and they didn't do anything before damage. As it turns out, they've got a Fatal Push, okay, that kind of punishes us, and then they've got Petty Theft to bounce Swifty. Not a very good play overall, like in a vacuum, but it does kind of punish us. We were trying to either time walk them or 2-for-1 them. As it turns out, we haven't really managed to do either. And now what do? Well, I don't really want to time walk myself, so I'm just going to fire off a Kozilek's Return. If they feel compelled to compete with this, compete over this with permission, I think that's fine, because we've got 4 cards in hand, 5 with this, they only have 2 plus whatever could compete over it. If not, at least we don't time walk ourselves, we 1-for-1 the opponent, whatever. Not the greatest, but not the worst either. We draw a Crash Through. Alright, that's good. That's a good signal card to let us get back on our tempo plan. Unfortunately, opponent's got another Spell Stutter Sprite, and that is a little bit rough. Once again, Forked Bolt at sorcery speed, definitely hurting us. I don't want to always just favor my pet card for no particular reason. We have to acknowledge the downside of sorcery speed. It does come up here. So then I'm like, do I just Forked Bolt this thing now to take care of it? Or do I crash through? And I'm like, what am I crashing through toward? Do we really need the trample that much in this matchup? Probably not. It's more about the value game. If they're having to chump blocking in general, I think that's good for us. So then we say crash through has the higher ceiling maybe because we can find another land and then have our cake and eat it too. That's exactly what we do. Forked Bolt, redeeming itself, tagging that Spell Starter Sprite, doing 1 to the opponent. Definitely not bad. OP's starting to flood out a bit, right? They've got 5 lands, and they don't hardcast a Shinobi, which is one thing that I thought might be hanging out in hand. We draw another land ourselves. We're also flooded, but we've got Sunbaked Canyon, so I'm going to fetch to thin, then crack it, and then we've got Swifty. So, okay. I'm definitely in 2 different minds here. Like, we could attack, and once again, we could hope that they, like, flash in the Borrower, fire up the Mutavault, Kozilek's Return gets him, we also deal 2 damage. I'm like, you know what, if we don't do anything, they're definitely flashing in Borrower. We can then K-Return that away, and I think that's fine. These are not the blowouts we'd hoped for with Kozilek's Return, but they are at least decent use cases, right? So I've decided basically not to really play around permission anymore, so we just wait till their turn, see if they've got anything else to do, and we can't really risk the ninjutsu, so we go for it. It works. And then we draw Swifty. We draw Inspiring Vantage. We've got Swifty in hand. We will crack into Boros Charm, and now I'm just setting up for the long game here, deploying a threat, say and go. Mutavault holding off our attacks pretty well on the whole, you have to say. We could always bluff attack. I don't think it's worth it. If the opponent is flooded, they might call the bluff, reasoning that, well, at least maybe we force them to use a spell suboptimally and we save a little bit of life, with the upside being it was a bluff and we kill them, right? So we don't take the bluff road. Opponent plays yet another land, and they then hardcast a Fallen Shinobi. And I'm starting to think this is actually a big problem. We don't have any kill spell potential in hand, not even like 1 damage spell, hoping to draw another. We haven't sided in paths. And the opponent is all the way at 15, so killing them is unlikely. But then we draw another Boros Charm, and if we fire both charms upstairs, they are actually down to 1. They can't crack that fetch land. And then they maybe have 1 turn to find something good with Shinobi. They might also have to draw something good off the top to stay alive. So I'm thinking, okay, let's go for the attack. We also have the option of them, like they did in game 1, blocking with Shinobi, and then we get to give something double strike with Boros Charm, kill it in combat. So I think I'm still seeing it as the right play, still seeing it as a win-win, but not as much of a win-win as it was last time. Because if we don't draw out the block, they're actually not quite dead. But we fire everything upstairs, card quality of Boros Charm and great evidence, opponent's down to 1. So again, they've got basically 1 look with the Shinobi at some way to stay in the game, and they sure do find it. They've got Soul-Scar Mage and Lightning Bolt, absolute disaster for us. And then they've got, I think they've had a dud in a hand for a while, maybe just another land, but they rip Bloodchief's Thirst for turn, so it is a complete nightmare. Now, despite all of this, I have still kind of read them for maybe not much else in hand. Despite everything that just went horribly wrong, and that's about as bad as it could get, they're still at 1. They're still dead to any burn spell if we can find one. So let's find out what's off the top. Look at that, it's Forked Bolt. We got you, OP. Or do we? No, it's an Ether Gust. They've been slow rolling an Ether Gust for just such a time, I suppose, and that is absolutely disastrous for us. And note that we can't even just try to stay alive and put it to the top, because if we put it on the top, they'll find it with Shinobi and they'll kill us. So we've got to bottom the Ether Gust. Oh my goodness, our bottom the Fort Bolt off of Ether Gust. Absolutely crazy game. Crazy match overall against a really cool deck, by the way, from OP. And they're going to fire up Mutavault. They're going to put us to 2, and look at that. Crash through Lightning Bolt off the top. They're finding better gas than we are out of our own deck. Don't you hate it? So anyway, we die at the hands of a hard-cast Fallen Shinobi after a really close back and forth, after an all-in shove with Boros Charm, which I do believe was correct. The other option, I guess, would have been to sit back with Boros Charms and try to double spell to get double strike during an attack or something, but they had a Bloodchief's Thirst. They would have main phased it. Maybe they also play a little bit more patiently that way. Who knows? But I don't regret shoving all in, putting them to 1, giving them 1 chance to find basically 3 good cards off the top. 2 from our deck, 1 from their own deck. They did, and their 4th remaining card was also an answer on the stack to a burn spell. So they had to have absolutely everything. They sure did. Fair enough. On to game 3. All right, G3, we're respecting the need for instant speed a little bit more, and also to be more aggressive and proactive. So we bring back a Lumimancer. We also get 2 Paths to Exile in there. I still really don't like ramping this deck, but we have seen the need for instant speed. We cut a Boros Charm, even though it was pretty decent there at racing, and a Rip Apart to make way, just committing a little bit more to answering the board when it absolutely needs to be answered, as well as, I suppose, to racing them. And I'll admit that this is a relatively sketchy keep, but against the 1-for-1 deck, I don't really love mauling, right? And they definitely have their share of 2-for-1s in the mid-game as well. So, Soul-Scar Mage. Hopefully Kozilek's return can make up for the lack of individual spot removal, right? That's the thinking if they establish a decent-sized board early. Again, it is instant speed itself. We've seen how relevant that is. Unfortunately, opponent has kept 7, turn 1 Fatal Push, turn 2 Basic Island, OP operating painlessly and with a lot to like, it seems. So we do have the Bedlam Reveler that we're looking toward. We draw a Crash Through, would have been way better last turn, right? Just to curve out a little bit more, even though our Soul-Scar was going to die. But we'll fire it off now. We find a Lava Dart. Okay, the hand's shaping up a bit. We're able to interact a couple different ways now at instant speed, and we're just always working to fill that graveyard for this beautiful son of a gun, the Bedlam Reveler, right? So OP just opting on the end step, going to the bottom and playing a Flooded Strand, passing. Another reason it could be okay for us to play a little bit more draw goes because we have a high land count with Sunbaked Canyon. So if they miss land drops, it's going to benefit us. And if we start flooding out, we can crack canyons. So even though it's not the explosive start we'd hoped for, there's still definitely some decent things going on. I decide to just main phase the Forked Bolt that I draw simply because we are working toward that Bedlam Reveler, and it's something proactive to do in general and in that regard. Opponent, I'm starting to think really punishes us for that play, though, because Vendilion Click, I expect them to take Bedlam Reveler, and because they can't have the click survive whether they take one or the other of our instant speed removal spells, and Bedlam Reveler is the big mirror breaker, so I really expect them to take it. They tank for a long time, and then do nothing. And then they do nothing. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm just going to use my mana efficiently. Kozilek's return, just a 1-for-1, basically. Opponent gets a little hand info out of the deal. That's about it. So, they must have an answer to Bedlam Reveler. Now we have to start worrying about that. And I'm thinking, okay, it's got to be permission. But then I see Cling to Dust. And I'm saying, okay, they're going to try to attack the graveyard and keep Bedlam Reveler stranded in hand. And I guess it succeeded because for right now anyway, we cannot cast him. So I'm thinking, all right, please draw a free spell, please draw a free spell. And look at that, not for the first time this league, free spell right off the top in our hour of need. Now we can Lava Dart OP, now we can Gut Shot OP. And I'm thinking, okay, they made that whole play, they left Reveler in hand because Cling they thought would be enough. Now it's not going to be enough. Let's go. Very, very excited. But as it turns out, they've got an Aether Gust in the back pocket anyway. So between Cling and Aether Gust, you understand why they actually just left our hand that way. That really sucks. But we put Bedlam Reveler back on top. Hopefully they don't have a hard counter in the back pocket. But if they had it last turn, they would have probably used it. And they could always just tempo us out with another Aether Gust or something. But instead, they're going to tap mostly out for a Kalitas. Now, I have mixed feelings about that, because number one, now we're thinking the Rev's got to resolve, but number two, oh boy, this guy's really scary in his own right in this matchup, and they're at 15, we're at 12. We're actually, like, a little bit behind the 8-ball here, and we have to tap mostly out for a Rev, so it is anybody's game still. OP still with 3 cards in hand. We draw Clever Lumimancer, Inspiring Vantage, 2 relative medium finds here, but we also find a Bedlam Reveler, number 2. So we are committing to the long game, and I actually am a little bit wary of playing her, actually, the Lumimancer, because this could turn on a push for them that might otherwise be dead. And we also take a point of damage to do it. But with the Bedlam Reveler in hand, we want as many cards out of the hand as possible, right? Just for max value, and I'm just saying, you know what, let's put faith in our own deck, right? What is the worst Kalitas can do? Opponent tanks for a while, and then they're going to play a Collective Brutality. Now, this is a little bit of an interesting play. They don't check our hand. If they were checking our hand, I would understand it a little bit more. Instead, they're going to drain us, and they're going to try to kill the Lumimancer. So what this accomplishes is they get to drain us, which is relevant as we've established, and also forcing this Lava Dart out on their terms, rather. And so I understand that. I don't think it's a bad play, but it did surprise me a little bit. I am relieved that nothing died, so no zombie made for Kalitas. That is completely awesome. And we were at Manamorphose off the top. Talk about completely awesome, right? Obviously, we want to fade permission here, because that could strand the other Rev in hand and stop us from going off. But they don't have it, right? They never had it in their lives, and we also draw a Lava Dart. Now, another intriguing decision point here. I genuinely considered Lava Darting Kalitas, because I'm thinking, well, if we draw Lightning Bolt, then we go Dart Bolt, Kalitas is dead. Now, on the other hand, I'm thinking, well, okay, if we're lucky enough to resolve the Rev, draw Lightning Bolt, that's so good that I'm absolutely happy to flash back this Lava Dart, and we can kill Kalitas that way. So that was my thought process. So we just Lava Dart upstairs, so it's not a wasted ping, you know, if we don't hit any way to finish Kalitas off. So then Lava Dart resolves, Bedlam Reveler resolves, all is well in the world, but I didn't count on possibly drawing our second Fort Bolt, our only other Fort Bolt, and if we had darted Kalitas, then we could Fort Bolt, flashback dart, finish Kalitas that way. Sadly, we don't and we can't, so what on earth do we do? Well, a few different lines here available to us, but one good thing about having darted upstairs, at least, is we do get to light up right now. So let's do that. I'm hoping for maybe an untapped land, lightning bolt. That would be a pretty good pair of finds, right? Instead, we find more value, more gas, but nothing that helps us right now. And we're at 6, so I'm actually still really worried about this, and I almost talked myself into not attacking with both, but I'm thinking, look, they kind of have to do something here because we are representing a free spell to kill them. They clearly don't have permission. I didn't think that they have removal either, so let's see what they've got. And it's hard also in general to just pass up the 6-7 heavy hitters here, right? So Mutavault getting thrown under the bus here. They're going to go ahead and then Petty Theft. our other Bedlam Reveler back to hand. So that is bad for them on a value access, but that's no longer what the game is about. They've already lost the value game. Now they need to try to win. And that is actually a pretty nutty turn of events. I am still grateful they just didn't have a kill spell with Kalidas, right? They're doing bounce effects and chump blocking instead. Nevertheless, a very scary moment here. So we just play Inspiring Vantage back out, pass to the OP, Brazen Borrower, one of the best cards they could have in that spot, again, besides a kill spell, I think. And then we'll see what happens here with big Kalidas, because it is a little bit scary here. They're life linking, they're chipping in for 3, and indeed they will make that attack. Then they find Drown in the Lock, so they have found a hard kill spell. It gets worse and worse and worse for us, so they've made a zombie, and now we're just afraid of a third land almost, because they can flash this in, or another kill spell. They don't seem to have either, so I don't know what it is. We've got another Rev in hand, and we draw Path to Exile, so that, my friends, is a wondrous find. It's going to pump the Lumimancer. We're going to get rid of Kalidas. I'm going to try that first, because whether or not that resolves is going to inform the rest of our turn. But it will resolve, thankfully. That is big, big game. Now, we still got to tread carefully, because we're all the way down at 3. Next thing I'm going to do is try to just Fork Bolt away this zombie, and indeed, that will work out pretty well for us, too. Lumimancer growing by the moment. She's a 4/5. Bedlam Reveler is costing 2. He's going to come back down. He's going to hit the field. Let's go. So, then I'm thinking a couple different things here. This is actually not even necessarily free to play the Swifty, because now we're dead to a top-decked Collective Brutality. I know they don't have one now, but they could always top-deck one, right? So now we're at 2. That's a little bit scary as well. And then we're going to go ahead and go for a flashback to Lava Dart, and the opponent's last card is Spell Stutter Sprite, so that is a bit of a tilt. The Rip Apart not helping us here. We've got too many Sunbaked Canyons to cast it anyway. It's coming right down to the line, and then we're attacking, and we're thinking, okay, what's OP gonna do? They do throw Spell Stutter under the bus. I understand that. Again, if we just have like a Bolt or whatever and they don't block, they'd be dead. However, that does allow us to light up the stage here, or cast a Lumimancer, but we go for light up. And that takes us down to 1. That doesn't change anything. If Spell Stutter had not blocked, though, we would have not been able to do anything. We find Inspiring Vantage, which I will play. There's a Lava Dart chilling in the Exile zone. Lumimancer fades away, and then it's up to the opponent to find something to do here. They tank for a little while, and then they're going to go ahead and go for a Cling to Dust, a bit of a desperation move. Obviously, we were afraid of that Cobra off the top. We were afraid maybe of double spelling with Brazen Borrower to stay alive long enough to find a Cobra. Who knows? But they dig, and they don't find anything that helps them out, and that is the game. So I told you guys that was an intense one. Hope you enjoyed the recap of that. That was a thrill to play both players with almost exactly 5 minutes on the clock, an enormous amount of decision-making back and forth. 2 unique, cool decks. Their deck admittedly more unique than ours, and ours is newer, though, right? Ours is fresher, and lots of interaction, lots of interesting things going on, and Bedlam Reveler kind of powering us over the line near the end, but every aspect of our deck necessary to compete with a whole lot of hate. I mean, look at their graveyard, for goodness sakes, and their Exile zone. Everything they're doing is nutty against us, except maybe like Vendilion Click is kind of medium. But Fatal Push, Ether Gust, Collective Brutality, Drown in the Lock, Spell Stutter Sprite has her moments. Again, the fairies themselves a little medium against us. Cling to Dust is great in a long game. Kalidas is insane. Everything they're doing is kind of crazy, right? But we do, and this is what I mean about everybody being prepared for prowess, but we do get over the line. Awesome match, well played to OP. Let's go to round 4. Winning that die roll for a change against a Lurrus Companion deck, and we've got triple Soul-Scar Mage, 2 lands, a Manamorphose to enable them, Soul-Scars in redundancy, maybe to fight through removal we can expect out of most Lurrus decks, and light up the stage to grind. It's a really decent hand. It's a really solid, strong hand. The thing it does not do is control the board, so we'll see exactly what type of Lurrus deck it is, but absolute guaranteed keep, even in a pseudo-blind, right? Because all kinds of decks play in Lurrus these days. Opponent's going to go Polluted Delta, pass, back over to us. So we draw a 3rd land. That could be absolutely fine. Let's see whether Soul-Scar Mage connects. That is the downfall. Nothing with haste, so no guaranteed way to enable light up the stage, except for the fact, I guess, that opponent didn't fetch main phase, right? So I guess we could have made, even if they had Fatal Push or whatever, we could absolutely have Spectacled Light Up either way. So that's the play. We're going to go kick it off with that. Opponent's going to Force of Negation, pitching Cryptic Command. So it is a Lurrus deck playing a bunch of control cards, which leads me to believe it's that Grixis Lurrus deck that's been floating around a bit. I don't know if this originated with Aspiring Spike, maybe, something like that. In any case, seems like another real bad matchup for us. We'll have to see exactly what we can do, but they've got Lurrus to grind with us and to incidentally life gain us out. They've got all of the interaction that we hate. Force of Negation, Fatal Push, Lightning Bolt, Archmage's Charm, the worst offender of them all. Getting your Prowess creature stolen by this card is such a feel-bad. And it's permission, and it's an instant speed draw too. Hate to see it, right? So, again, I tell you, the meta is pretty hostile to Prowess, but our deck is holding its own. Let's see what we can do. We have, again, a really good hand. Let's see if a Manamorphose will resolve. The draw of another one's definitely very good. Opponent's going to fetch and play a Logic Knot, only having to delve one. Admittedly, we could have made them delve two with a Sunbaked Canyon main phase, but probably won't change the outcome of anything too strongly, and we will smash in for 4. Definitely not bad, putting them to 11 in the face of a lot of interaction. We've still got a really wide board. Main deck, I'm not so worried about a sweeper effect or like EE or something like that. Probably not the likeliest thing, so we just got to put the pedal to the metal. That's the thing to do, and that's also following the signals of our hand. Looks like a spell will actually resolve Manamorphose. Resolving, we find Crash Through off of it, which is completely awesome. We find Clever Lumimancer, so now I'm thinking, okay, we can play Clever Lumimancer, but if we do, that means we are playing Lava Dart, right? If we had white floating, that would be a different story. Then we could just play her, go to attack, see what happens. I decided actually to hedge against that and to say, okay, if opponents got like a Archmage's Charm here, then maybe we need the Lava Dart to not get that blown out as hard by it. If they have removal and permission, whatever, not permission, but removal or bounce, we'll just have to see. So I decided to, sacrifice a little bit of efficiency because we're just trying to kill them as optimally as we can this turn, or have as optimal of a turn this turn as possible. Not so much worried about winning the long game. If we don't win right now, I think we're in some trouble, but we win right now because they've got a single kill spell, which is great, but then we've got the Lava Dart, and the opponent's just scooping to that on sight. They are, of course, dead to it, plus the flashbacks. So there we go. Once again, stealing a game one barely. If we were a little bit less explosive, a little bit less threat dense, and not having quite the right balance of threats versus non-creature spells, I think they would have stabilized. If you look at the cards that they have access to, it's really hard to imagine us winning the long game unless we can maybe resolve a Bedlam Reveler. But for now, we'll be happy with that game one win. Let's go to game two. All right, so I sided almost not at all. I brought in that 4th Bedlam Reveler, cut a single Mutagenic Growth. That's about it. It is definitely possible to play a Rip Apart. I decided not to. Haven't seen any creatures, although with Lurrus, they play some, right? But for now, it's like, okay, Grixis not playing as many Planeswalkers as other control color trios, right? And Rip Apart just not being proactive enough for my tastes until I see a little bit more. Opponent keeping 7, leading on Island into EE. Now, we have Clever Lumimancer, and I'm actually choosing to play her into the EE. Why? Because even though she's our only threat, she's actually something that we don't expect to live anyway. None of our 1-drops we should expect to live for that long right away against a deck like this, keeping 7. So if the best they can do is play a land and tempo themselves out by spending 3 mana to kill our 1-drop, that's probably cool. We also need to enable Light Up the Stage somehow. That looks like right now the only way we can do it is Lightning Bolt. So if we go Lightning Bolt them, light them up, we actually are giving them attention. Maybe they have permission in hand. Do they want to compete over the Light Up? And if they do, then we get to smash for 4 with Lumimancer. So unless they have like Force of Negation and the second land for EE, then they can't do both. And even that would be a 2-for-1 and a tempo win in our favor. So we have to use Lumimancer this way. Otherwise, we're just like not being proactive enough, right? So draw of another land, definitely a little bit rough, but we'll follow the plan, kick it off with Lightning Bolt, follow up with a Light Up the Stage. That's going to resolve, so I'm starting to feel very happy until I see this. Really, double Bedlam Reveler. You absolutely hate to see it. Two of our best cards going totally by the wayside. A totally wasted light up the stage. And of course, they EE away the Lumimancer. So now we've just got a Manamorphose and a handful of lands. And we draw another land off the top. So it's looking pretty poor for us. I lead on Sunbaked Canyon because I've learned my lesson against Logic Knot. And also, because if we don't draw anything, we can at least crack the canyon and do something. We draw Crash Through, we'll use it, it'll resolve. Then we've got Lightning Bolt. I'm cracking the canyon. We're just trying to kind of rebuild from the disastrous find of double Reveler. Bye-bye, sweet princes. We hardly knew ye. They're going to go into exile. Opponent was holding up an Archmage's Charm that whole time. They didn't feel the need to compete over our cantrip, so they just cash it in to draw 2 on the end step. The card's a nightmare to face for this deck. It does everything they need to do for only 3 mana, and it's often a 2-for-1. Very, very rough stuff. There's one of the creatures that we knew was in there. It is Sprite Dragon. It's going to ping us with an attack for 1, opponent passing, holding up 2 mana. We have found a couple okay cards. There's a Soul-Scar Mage, there's a Manamorphose, we have a Lightning Bolt as well. We're starting to kind of put something back together, but I want to make the opponent blink first with the Sprite Dragon, partially to play around it growing, and partially to play around permission. On the end step, opponent will blink first, they'll go for a Drown on the Lock, so we in response will bolt the Sprite Dragon, take care of that. A couple 1-for-1 trades made all at the same time. An opponent, terrifyingly, is going to shock in their 5th land and say go. I don't know exactly what that means, but I know it's not good. They didn't need that for Cryptic Command, right? I mean, we'll just kind of draw another land. That's just not the greatest. So at this point, we're so far behind, we're just going to play our cards, hope they don't have anything. They have a Fatal Push. That sucks, but I was afraid of, like, Snap Archmage's Charm to steal it. You know what I mean? So a mere Fatal Push. Okay, we accept. It could be much worse. And it is much worse because we draw yet another land off Manamorphose. We are flooded to hell and back in the face of a very strong Grixis curve out on the play. Now they got something on the end step. What is it? Does it get any worse? Oh yeah, into the story. Just gonna, draw 4 on the end step. No big deal. So opponent completely refueled. They have 7 cards. I guess 8 cards if you count Lurrus, to our virtual none, because lands 5 and 6 in hand don't really accomplish anything for us. So who would win? A Prowess deck with no cards or a Control deck with 8 cards? I don't know, but we'll play it out. OP with a Sprite Dragon. Gonna hit us. We find a Lava Dart. I once again need everything possible to go right, so I'm just main phasing it to get around Cryptic Command, basically. Amazingly, it works. We're still just like acres and acres behind OP. They'll put Lurrus into hand, they'll say go, we'll fetch to thin out. We've got a Gut Shot. All right, we're continuing to draw our ping effects. Probably not good enough, but we're going to keep playing. Learn a little bit more maybe about OP's deck, but they deny us even that. They're going to start thought scouring us to maybe get more information out of their deck, or out of our deck, rather. I think both players know that they're going to win, so it's just an information war now, right? And opponent is going to buy back a Sprite Dragon. We're going to go for the double, for the 3-for-1, or I guess it's kind of a 5-for-1 because the card Lurrus itself was free, and it brought back a Sprite Dragon. And then even after that, we'd have to 3-for-1 ourselves to kill it, but we don't even get to do that. Drown in the Lock, beating our flashback Lava Dart. That's enough for me. Absolutely crushed game 2 by this Grixis deck. A very impressive curve out, but again, if you look at their graveyard, every single card is pretty darn good against us. So it's a tough life out there. Let's see if we can do a little bit better in game 3 on the play. A small change to the sideboard. We cut a Phyrexian spell. I think we had already cut the growth, so we cut another one in the form of Gut Shot. We just play a rip apart, It is maybe a little bit better on the play at answering Sprite Dragon, and also we know it can beat Lurrus. We know it can do maybe a couple other things if they have Planeswalkers. It can also beat an EE on turn 1. So all that said, it's still, I think, relatively narrow and reactive, not where we want to be, so I bring in only 1 copy. In any case, we've got another nice hand. We've had like a bit of a mixed bag with the hands, but to the extent that we are keeping enough 5-spell 2-land hands, that is certainly the formula for Prowess, right? And we lead on good old Clever Lumimancer, and she will promptly get bolted off of Esteem Vents, Mishra's Bauble. Also getting them a little bit of information out of our deck. They know we're about to draw this basic mountain, so we'll go ahead and run that out. And we're just going to go for a Manamorphose. We're looking for Monastery Swiftspear or for Lava Dart, Lightning Bolt, Forked Bolt to enable light up the stage. And that is the play, because we now don't really have much else to do. Opponent's got other ideas. Force of Negation. Pitching Sprite Dragon, though, I think overall that is a win for us. It's not a pure 2-for-1, though, because we would have loved that card to go to the graveyard. Part of our game plan here, of course, is sticking a Rev at some point. Hope you're going to play a Polluted Delta. They're going to say go. We have some Crash Throughs. If we only had one Crash Through, I might just try to hard cast a Light Up, but because we have two, I'm going to decide to lead on those. It definitely is a higher ceiling play. It definitely fuels the Reveler better as well, because even if they have permission, like at the end for light up the stage or something, then at least we'll have triple spelled toward that Rev. But yeah, the draw of Lightning Bolt definitely pretty good, because it just does what we want to do, enables light up, and light up itself will resolve 2, revealing a 4th land and a Swifty. A good turn overall. We did spin our wheels a little bit, but with the Reveler waiting in the wings, that's okay. And opponent just didn't really do anything with their turn either. They'll grab a relatively painless Watery Grave, and then they will untap. Look like they're going to make a play, and then they don't, and they don't make a 3rd land drop. And now, even though things are kind of going medium, now I'm thinking, okay, this is our big window. Let's go. Let's try to exploit this as hard as we can. The opponent might not miss that 3rd land forever, but to the extent that we have a good chance to beat this deck that seems like a real tough matchup, it's probably right about now. So I'm, again, splitting the difference between curving out and doing some damage now and setting up for bigger turns in the future. We know that if they don't have permission, which they don't, and they don't have more land drops to make, they've probably got to have removal. So no big surprise that Swifty will get Fatal pushed. But the Crash Through resolves, and we find a Lumimancer. So look at this. We get to go Lumimancer, Soul-Scar Mage, and Bedlam Reveler is in hand. 1, 2, 3, 4 spells in the bin. 4 lands on the field, so Rev can resolve next turn. We're now giving the opponent a huge tension between dealing with the board and holding up permission for Rev. So to that end, we do begin with an attack. We almost don't care so much what happens here. Almost want to see them spend their mana removing these things, right? Because Rev is the big mirror breaker. But if they don't, that's cool too, because we've drawn light up the stage. That is going to, of course, be cast for 1, making it free relative to Rev, unless they have a Force of Negation, and that is the big fear here. But they don't, and we're amply rewarded. We find another land and another light up the stage. The value is about to be completely insane. Opponent will Ether Gust in response to our fetch land, where I was just fetching first basically to thin and get better draws off of Rev. That's kind of spicy, right? Because no matter whether we top or bottom it, it'll just get shuffled back in. At the same time, I don't really care. So whatever. And actually, if the opponent had maybe made a more obvious but less subtle play of just gusting that during attacks, our turn would not have been as good, right? In any case, that guy will get shuffled away. And then here comes the star of the show, Bedlam Reveler, drawing 3, finding us another Rev, a Lava Dart, and Inspiring Vantage. We also get to light up the second time, and we've got another Lava Dart and another Vantage waiting in the wings. Absolutely love it. If the opponent doesn't draw the 3rd land right now, they're pretty dead. They do, in fact, draw the 3rd land. Fair enough. What's it going to be? They'll shock in. They'll play a Kolaghan's Command. We do lose Lumimancer. That's tough. We do lose the Inspiring Vantage. That doesn't matter at all, because we can only play that one or the one from Exile this upcoming turn anyway. So, no big deal with that. So basically, 3 mana shock, we can survive that, and we'll crash through, buffing the Rev into another Lava Dart, so we actually just have the kill right here, right now. But if we want to style on them, which we do, we can do it this way. We play the other Bedlam Reveler, we pitch this Lava Dart, and these 3 Lava Darts in the bin are enough to get exactly lethal with simply Prowess triggers, to say nothing of the pings themselves. We also have 2 gigantic Devil Horrors on the field, another land to play, 6 lands on the field with Sunbaked Canyon for next turn, and Lava Dart number 4, and a Lightning Bolt, and a Boros Charm in hand. So like I said, if we want to style on them, that's how we do it. There you go, guys. Getting over the line, admittedly, probably only able to do so like that anyway, because they did miss the third land drop for a couple turns. That, make no mistake, was big game. However, if you look at the type of gas that was coming off the top, assuming we could resolve the first Bedlam Reveler even if they were curving out with lands, I think we had the beating of this deck anyway. Nevertheless, a very scary matchup, a very tough matchup, but our third win out of 4 so far against 4 varying degrees of unfavorable. You can't really complain about that, and if the meta ever gets a little bit less hostile, watch out, because Prowess is going to be very strong, but as is, definitely doing some work here today. Let's go to the final round, see what we can do. Okay, round 5 on the play, and we're against a Yorion deck, and our hand is okay. I think it's definitely keepable in the blind. And against Yorion deck specifically, I'm hoping it's against, like, taxes, because we haven't had a small creature opponent yet, really. We haven't had a favorable matchup yet, and we'd be able to survive, like, the taxing aspect of things with all these lands. We'd be able to control the board a bit with Lava Dart while pressuring with Soul-Scar into Crash Through. So we're hoping it's, like, Yorion taxes. The opponent will mull to 6. Okay, fair enough. And then it is good old SSM on duty, and opponent will go Verdant Catacombs Pass. Now, I know a lot of people can play Lurrus these days. A lot of decks are playing Yorion too. We draw light up the stage, which is great. And I'm not really sure whether or not they're representing removal, so I do kind of split the difference here with a Lava Dart, after they declined to assign a block, basically. If we wanted to just do another point of damage, we could have just done all that main phase, including this light up. Probably won't matter at the end of the day, but every point of life can certainly count. Verdant Catacombs threw me off, but looking back, it's like, okay, they're an 80-card deck. No matter what it is, they're going to play some goofy fetch lands, right? And they go get Indatha Triome, the Absent one. Fair enough, okay. And so far, we're doing our thing. We're pressuring a bit. We've gotten a 2-for-1 with Light Up. We've got another threat and a Boros Charm waiting in the wings. Unfortunately, opponent will Lightning Helix our threat here. That's a nice way to recoup the lost life, right? Nothing we can do about it. We draw Manamorphose. That is a decent one for sure, but for now, we're going to just use these cards before they go to Exile, maybe save the Manamorphose for a huge swing next turn involving Crash Through as well. Opponent play has Pillar of the Perunes, by the way, so this is a clear sign, obviously, that we're dealing with 5-color nonsense. I hate these decks so much. I don't think they should exist. And opponent's got a Teferi, speaking of cards that shouldn't exist, in an archetype that shouldn't exist. That's only my opinion, though, right? Anyway, crashing through into Manamorphose, and we really want a good turn this turn. I'm looking for Monastery Swiftspear, frankly. So we're spending the Manamorphose eye to not much avail, and we get her. So that's actually really nice. We are rewarded for digging more aggressively than we perhaps 100% needed to on the face. That's what I was looking for, though, and we do find her. So we take care of Tef. That's pretty big game, and we found another threat to play as well. Definitely some good stuff. Back over to the OP, they'll deploy a tap land, and then it is going to be Kaya's Guile to 2-for-1 us yet again, gaining life, forcing us to sack. And I was almost a little bit more worried about the Graveyard Exile than the life gain, right? Because one of the things I'm hoping is, like, let's just draw Bedlam Reveler, but of course it is another land, so we got a Crack Canyon. We just find a Gut Shot, not very exciting. The opponent has gained 7 life already while killing our stuff. That's pretty crazy when we are only on an aggro plan, not really able to, again, go over the top of their interaction with Bedlam Reveler. So what else do they have? Is it another X-for-1 that gains life? What do you think? What do you think in the 5-color deck? You guessed it, it's Omnath, the Locus of Creation. Yep, absolute tilt. So, yeah, again, an X-for-1 that gains some life. You hate to see it. Back over to us. Can our Gut Shot compete with the Omnath? Probably not. But we'll cantrip into a Crash Through, and hey, we got Lightning Bolt, we got Gut Shot, we got X-for-1 ourselves, even more so than we already were to beat the Omnath, but we do beat the Omnath, and we get him back down to 18. So the opponent has now gained 11 life, every form of life gain coming attached to a 2-for-1 of some kind. And then it's just a duplicate Omnath, and I don't want to play this game anymore. And they go Omnath into Renin 6. off of a fetch land, and then they actually had 3 mana floating, but for some reason declined to put Yorion into hand. Really doesn't matter, because we just draw Swifty off the top. We cannot attack into the Omnath successfully, even if we could. What are we doing against the Wrenn, against the Yorion, against the Omnath, against 3 more cards in hand? It's just over. So my view on these decks, and they're not as bad as they were with Uro around, make no mistake, but they're still like, if these decks can't be policed adequately by hyper aggro, I don't know why that's okay. You know what I mean? I think a 5-color deck inherently should come with enormous deck building costs, especially unfocused 80-card ones. This is in danger of turning into a rant, so I'll kind of close it off here. But the fact that so many of these cards, like every spell they cast except Teferi, gained them life, right? Lightning Helix, Kaya's Guile, Omnath Locus of Creation, they can support a mess of a mana base, they can support 80 cards, and they can recoup all of the value that they maybe didn't get in the early game in the late game with such extreme inevitability on the back of Yorion and all the other Fire Design cards, that why not just like make sure aggro decks can't beat you in the early game? I would too, right? It's just very strange that this deck exists in Modern. It has never sat right with me. I kind of hate it, but yeah, let's see what we can do in game 2, right? Sideboarding against this pile. Once again, I bring in only 1, not 2 or 3 rip apart. It's got some targets, but it can be a little bit wasteful as well. And we also have Cleansing Wildfire in the mix. I know that we're not going to really basic check them out of the game, because another nonsensical thing about these 5-color decks is they just can play an enormous amount of basic lands and somehow they still function all the time. But Cleansing Wildfire against the Utopia Sprawl and Abundant Growth is still pretty good. It's also just proactive, and even if we don't like Stone Rain them with with Wildfire, we can still maybe color screw them a little bit into the mid game. That's the idea. It's also just a good proactive thing to do. And we just cut a couple gut shots. Probably don't need that. Gonna keep the Mutagenic Growth instead to race that little bit harder and also to compete against the Lightning Helix. We've got an okay hand. Lumimancer on the play has definitely got some potential. There is an awkwardness between Manamorphose, Lumimancer, and Light Up. In other words, you can't main phase Manamorphose and then also main phase Light Up without a damage source, and nor can she just attack and Light Up second main. So that is imperfect. Other than that, the hand's all right. We have a good draw off the top, though. It's the aforementioned Wildfire, so that's going to be my play. We can lead on Manamorphose as well, just for a big swing, and that's what it's going to be. So we Manamorphose away the Utopia Sprawl land. We tax their basics a little bit from turn 1, and we smash for 4. Another really decent use case for Lumimancer. And off of the cantrip, we also draw Swifty, so we can enable Light Up the Stage next turn, one way or the other. Unfortunately, opponent's got the perfect turn 2 play, which is Wrenn and 6, pinging the Lumimancer. Hero to 0, very, very bad to be vulnerable to that particular line of play. And insult to injury, we just draw another Lumimancer and right away off the top. Not really doing anything for us now. And we cannot afford to pressure the Wrenn because we need to hit the opponent in order to enable this Light Up the Stage. So Wrenn gonna accrue value for the opponent for the foreseeable future. We do, however, continue to go wide off of our Light Up the Stage. We find 2 of our classic threats. We'll play the non-hasty one and save the hasty one for next turn. Wrenn's going to pick a land back up. Also, Wrenn just in general makes our Cleansing Wildfire that much worse too. In any case, they'll play a tap land, they'll play birds, and we'll draw Sunbaked Canyon. Not very exciting, my friends, and there is a tension between Canyon cracking to try to get them dead quicker and leaving it around and just accepting that we're a little bit slow until we can try to maybe go for a turn 5 Bedlam Reveler. And with the opponent at 12 and with their late game so astonishingly good, I decided that we need to be a little bit more proactive. I guess we got the client lagging a little bit here. So we will just have to click through the turns a bit. So we err on the side of proactivity, we crack a canyon, we find yet another threat, and we attack the opponent. Yeah, that's not the most impressive thing you've ever seen. We are imbalanced here, but it is something. We got a Fade Supreme Verdict. They can still cast it off birds, but that doesn't seem like they're going to. And then it is back over to us, where I guess we're lagging a bit again. Sorry about this. I'll just click next turn and try to see what happens. We draw Rip Apart. Okay. So we got to go for a Rip Apart on the birds, and that is lethal if they don't have anything. As it turns out, they do have something, and they'll fire it off before we decide where to direct our attacks. So Rip Apart will resolve, but then they have yet another Kaya's Guile. Very, very frustrating, so they once again gain the life. We sacrifice a Swiftie. And with that having happened, I decide, okay, because we're not killing them this turn anyway, and probably not next turn anyway, even if we draw a cantrip, it might not be enough. Let's attack the Wrenn and 6. And that allows us a couple different things. Number one, it means we can play Lumimancer, and now, instead of 3, maybe with 4, we can kill them with the right spell off the top. It also means they might not have the 5th land naturally. They can't pick it back up with Wrenn. That's going to lock a lot of cards in hand that this archetype plays. And in general, it just stops them from accruing value. But they've got the 5th land natty, and they've got a Supreme Verdict anyway, so everything sucks. It's just another million for 1. But our deck is not down and out, my friends. We rip Manamorphose off the top, a very fine draw. Into a land, another very fine draw, so now we get to Bedlam Reveler for cheap without losing any gas. However, we can't catch a break on the refuel, because we've got some more gas. But the problem is their deck really outgasses ours in the late game, which is where we've reached. And we can't really exploit this window of opportunity because we got a Bedlam Reveler that's cost 3, we've only got 2 open, ditto this light up the stage, and it's a land. So we can't do anything else this turn. Feels super bad. But our deck definitely still hanging in there, although I don't know if it has any right to. Back to the opponent, and guess who? Omnath, Locus of Creation yet again. Into a fetch land this time just to fully show us the meaning of pain. They're in a shock because nothing matters when your 5-color deck heals itself this well. And then the fully escalated, or I should say fully entwined, Kaya's Guile. Wiping out our graveyard, killing our Bedlam Reveler, stranding the other one in hand, gaining 4 life, and making a spirit just because, right? Insult to injury, am I right? So we're going to go ahead and kick it off with a light up the stage, and we're continuing to gas out. Like, make no mistake, our deck is looking relatively impressive here, but it's just not enough. It's just not enough. I shock in Sacred Foundry to let us crack Canyon on the end step, which is the highest upside play, which is exactly what we need at this stage of the game. But opponent just continuing to style. They find Abundant Growth into Prismatic Vista. And now it's Omnath time, making all the mana, putting Yorion into hand. They could cast Yorion here too, but they're just not going to, I guess. Once again, we're lagging. We'll take the hit from Omnath. And then they've got other stuff to do, I guess, to ferry into Abundant Growth, so they want an even bigger Yorion next turn, right? And our Lumimancer is bounced. We're looking like we're really on the back foot here. Even the client doesn't want to see the rest of this one. So we Forked Bolt. We get a nice Forked Bolt moment. Tag into Fairy, tag in the Spirit. We pitch our relatively dead Lumimancer as resolve a Bedlam Reveler. And we gas out decently from that, but on the unstep, opponent will trophy away Bedlam Reveler, and they're just keeping up with us at every possible turn. And now it's more of Omnath value. It is also Yorion time, I'm sure, after the attack. We go down to 6. Here comes the big Sky Nomad, and now we've got, 1, 2, 3, 4 different things to bounce that all draw cards. Absolutely grotesque, if you ask me. And then, obviously, all the other good stuff happens as well. I guess it's 5 cards. No, it is 4 cards, right? I'm sure you can understand how this game goes, but we might as well see it to the end. I'm tempted not to, though, just because we're so laggy with the client. Okay. Are we functional? No, I gotta hit next turn again. And look, our deck continuing to really go off. It's an impressive display. It's just not enough. We got Manamorphose, Crash through Manamorphose, Lightning Bolts. We're taking care of Omnath if we find something off of the third Bedlam Reveler, which we do. And we also don't want to put ourselves in range of getting killed by a Yorion attack, so that's about all we do from there. But then back to the OP, and it's just Niv Mizzet Reborn. And that finally, although I could have scooped many turns ago, that finally is enough for me to scoop. Again, you guys have heard my rant. I won't say anything more. I just, I just don't understand these decks. They have, from day one, absolutely tilted me to oblivion, and this was a very frustrating experience to play against this as well. But I hope you can see, despite the opponent's complete nut draw, despite the fact that the 5-color deck is somehow able to police hyper aggro decks very efficiently, and despite the fact that, in general, right now, people are packing a lot of removal and life gain, our deck still looked good. It's just not good enough to compete with these types of draws in this type of configuration. But even when we're getting crushed, we still actually did a whole lot here. There is a lot to like overall, but the meta remains very hostile to Prowess of any variant right now, I would say. All right, guys. So those were our matches. That was our replay. And notice how the interactive opposing decks progressively scaled up in fire design as they scaled up with colors, right? In round 3 we played the Dimir Faeries deck, which has very few fire cards. It is a true tempo deck with a lot of 1-for-1 interaction and trying to leverage tempo more than fire design does. And in the 4th round we played against the Grixis Lurrus deck, which with Archmage's Charm and Into the Story and Lurrus itself, it's starting to get really fiery up in there. And then we got the absolute pile in round 5, the Yorion Niv-Mizzet 80 card, garbage fire, basically. And of course, it got progressively harder for our deck to do anything as it scaled up in fire design, right? That's basically how it went. And again, I think the 5-color decks, to the extent that they should even exist at all, should really be able to be policed by a deck like ours. That's not how things are right now. The thing that is interesting also to note is that Dredge and Eldrazi Tron, especially, which we played in round 1 and round 2, especially with spell-based combo being mostly a thing of the past right now, those are arguably our 2 hardest prominent linear deck matchups, right? Not that Eldrazi Tron's totally linear, but you understand the point. So the point here, I guess overall, is that maybe we're 50-50 with the Dimir deck. Otherwise, it was 4 very difficult matchups, and we go 3-2. I'll definitely take it. A lot of our wins were very, very close. Some of our losses were close too. Others were just complete crushings. I'm happy that you, Jay, requested a replay, actually, because it was a little bit more frustrating to play these games at the time than it was to actually look back at them. So in that way, and in other ways, I hope this was well-suited to replay content, and I hope you enjoyed it. I do think that right at this exact moment is not the perfect time to pick up Prowess. It's still powerful enough that you can still definitely 5-0, or definitely spike an event, or definitely be competitive, but there is so much hate for it right now, I cannot overstate that. So I encourage you to experiment with the list, to have some fun with it. But right now, I would play other decks over this if you want to bring something that people are not teched for, that they're not prepared for. Now, we knew that going in, right? I knew that going in. That's why I designed the list with Bedlam Revelers, and honestly, that was rewarded. That was great. I don't think we would have won half the games we won without this nod to the grindy nature of the meta, nod to the interactive nature of the meta, nod to the presence of things like life gain, Chalice of the Void, spot removal. Bedlam Reveler can go over the top of all of that. At the same time, we were rewarded in other places for playing the really racing-oriented cards, Gutshot and Mutagenic Growth. And once again, the fact that these cards are really good enablers for Reveler, that is why this deck functions. And to me, that is the structure going forward for the foreseeable future. I think in a different metagame, there will be scope to play Lurrus and Baubles. I think maybe there's some scope to try Leon and Lightscribe as well in a different metagame, but for now, this is how I would advise iterating with Boros Blitz. So thank you once again for watching. Thanks again to Jay for your support, my friend. I hope this was useful for you in deciding whether or not you want to buy into into the White Splash or stick with Mono Red for now. As always, guys, in the comments, you let me know what you think about the content, what you think about Red-White Prowess in general, how much luck you've had with it, whether you've faced such horrible matchups on a consistent basis as I did here, and whatever else is going on. Our sideboarding decisions weren't especially rewarded, but if we ran into any kind of mirrors, we were going to absolutely wreck them with Firewalkers, Paths, and Rip-Aparts all coming in. Definitely very, very nicely configured for that. So if the meta gets a little bit less hostile to Prowess, because it's got tension with other things. And maybe, ironically, Prowess then rises a little bit, but there's still too much else for other decks to worry about. This build will be awesome, right? Because then you are still doing all the things we did here with a little bit less hate coming your way and absolutely able to break the mirrors in half. But if you want to take the sideboard in a different direction, maybe get a little bit of graveyard hate in there or something like that. Obviously, there's lots to do. So let me know in the comments. As always, any ideas that you've got. Thanks again for watching. Stay tuned to the channel, give this a thumbs up, give me a subscribe please if you've not already done so, and I'll see you for the next video. Take care, talk to you soon.